Take the pretty one, Lord Halver said, smiling as though this were generosity and not surrender. The words settled heavily in the chamber, sinking into velvet drapes and polished stone. The fire crackled, eager to fill the silence no one else dared to touch. Lord Halver gestured casually toward his daughters, as if selecting horses from a stable rather than deciding the shape of their lives. Elwyn stood exactly where she had been placed, centered, illuminated, pale gold hair braided just so. She lowered her eyes on cue, lashes trembling, hands folded delicately at her waist. Years of instruction lived in that posture. She knew how to be wanted. Mara stood to the side, not hidden, never hidden enough to be forgotten entirely, but positioned where the light thinned. Her dress was clean but plainly cut, the color chosen not to flatter but to avoid comment. Her dark hair escaped its pins at the nape of her neck, stubborn as she was. She did not bow her head. She did not raise her chin either. She waited. The Duke said nothing. He was taller than she expected, broader, the silver clasp of his cloak worn smooth with use rather than ornament. His eyes moved slowly, taking in the room, the lord, the daughters. When they reached Elwyn, they paused politely. When they reached Mara, they stopped. Lord Halver noticed and cleared his throat. My elder daughter is more suitable, he added, voice smooth with practiced dismissal. The other is quiet, bookish, no great beauty. Mara felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Not pain, not surprise, but the dull ache of confirmation. She had learned long ago that silence did not protect her. It merely made rejection efficient. The Duke stepped closer. The firelight caught the faint scar on his knuckle, the line of exhaustion beneath his eyes. He did not look at Lord Halver when he spoke. Do you often decide worth aloud? He asked mildly. Lord Halver laughed, uneasy. I decide outcomes. The Duke finally turned his gaze back to Mara. She met it without flinching. No pleading, no performance, only awareness. In that moment, something shifted, quietly, irrevocably. I will choose, the Duke said. And for the first time in the room, Mara felt the dangerous, impossible thing bloom. Not hope, but attention. I choose the other sister. The words did not fall loudly. They did not need to. They cut through the room with surgical calm, leaving no space for misunderstanding. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Elwyn's breath caught, sharp and small, like a child missing a step. Her hands tightened at her waist, knuckles whitening beneath lace. She lifted her eyes too quickly, the practiced softness breaking into something raw and incredulous. Lord Halver laughed. Too loud, too sudden. You jest, he said, waving one hand as though brushing aside an inconvenience. The younger is unsuitable. You asked for a bride, not a burden. The Duke turned at last to face him fully. I asked for a wife, he replied evenly. And I do not mistake polish for substance. Mara felt the room tilt. The floor seemed farther away than it had been moments before. She waited for the correction, the apology, the moment where he would realize the error and undo it. It did not come. Elwyn has been prepared for this, Lord Halver insisted, irritation sharpening his tone. She understands court life. She understands obedience. The Duke's gaze flicked to Elwyn, not unkindly, but briefly. That much is clear. Then his eyes returned to Mara, steady and unblinking. You did not ask to be here, he said. Yet you stand as if the choice is already made against you. Why? Mara swallowed. Her voice, when it came, surprised even her. Because it usually is. The admission landed heavier than any protest. Silence spread again, thicker now. Elwyn looked away, cheeks burning. For the first time, she seemed young, less an ornament, more a daughter caught in a game she had not invented. Lord Halver's face darkened. This is an insult. No, the Duke said quietly. This is a refusal to be directed. He extended his hand. Not dramatically, not for display, but toward Mara alone. You will not be cherished as decoration, he said, nor discarded for inconvenience. If you come, it will be by choice. Yours. Mara stared at his hand. At the small, human details, the scarred knuckles, the patience in the stillness. Her father's silence pressed like a weight, daring her to disobey. Slowly, she stepped forward. Her fingers brushed the Duke's palm. And in that single, irreversible motion, the bargain was broken. The carriage smelled of leather and cold iron, a scent too honest to be comforting. Snow pressed against the windows in pale smears as the estate vanished behind them. Mara kept her hands folded in her lap, as though afraid they might betray her by shaking. The Duke sat opposite her, long legs braced easily against the sway of the road. He had removed his gloves but not his composure. He did not stare. He did not fill the silence simply to prove he could. Minutes passed. Then miles. "You may ask," he said at last, voice low and unassuming. "Most do." Mara lifted her gaze. "Why me?" The question slipped out before she could soften it. It was not accusation, only bewilderment. He considered her carefully, as if honesty deserved time. "Because you were listening," he said. "And because you did not try to be chosen." She frowned slightly. "Is that enough?" "For a beginning," he replied. The carriage lurched over uneven ground. Outside, the land stretched barren and vast, stripped of ornament. Mara watched it pass, something loosening in her chest. "You are not what my father wanted," she said quietly. "I rarely am," the Duke answered. A corner of his mouth lifted, not amusement but recognition. She hesitated, then spoke again. "You will regret this." "Perhaps," he allowed, "but regret chosen freely is lighter than obedience." The words settled between them, steady and warm. Mara realized she had been bracing for cruelty disguised as kindness, for expectations she could never meet. Instead, there was space. He asked her about the books she read, not to test her, but to understand her. She spoke of histories, of rulers who mistook silence for loyalty and lost everything because of it. He listened as though each word mattered. "You see patterns," he said. "Only because I've lived in them," she replied. By the time dusk fell, the carriage lamps flickered to life. Mara felt exhaustion seep into her bones, but beneath it stirred something unfamiliar, anticipation not edged with dread. When the carriage finally slowed, the Duke spoke once more. "This is not a rescue," he said. "It is a partnership. If at any point you wish to turn back, say so." Mara looked at the dark outline of the northern hills rising ahead. For the first time, she said softly, "I don't want to." And the road carried them forward, not toward certainty, but toward consent. The ducal estate did not greet Mara with music or spectacle. It rose from the northern hills like something grown rather than built, stone weathered by time, banners faded by wind. No one lined the steps to measure her worth with their eyes. She found that absence to be a mercy. Inside, she was not immediately dressed, instructed, or corrected. Instead, she was shown rooms with windows that opened wide, corridors that led somewhere rather than back into themselves. The Duke walked beside her, not ahead. "You will not be reshaped," he said, as if reading the tension she had not yet released. "Only supported." Mara waited for the condition attached to those words. None came. Days passed, then weeks. She learned the rhythms of the estate, the quiet power of its steward, the way the servants spoke freely in her presence once they realized she listened. When disputes arose among the tenants, the Duke invited her to sit in council, not as ornament, but as witness. At first, she spoke little. Old habits clung stubbornly, but when she did speak, the room shifted. She noticed what others missed, the hunger hidden behind anger, the fear beneath formality. The Duke never interrupted her. "You see people," he told her one evening, as they stood watching the fields darken into night. "I had to," she said. "No one was looking at me." He turned to her then, not with surprise, but with something like reverence. Their closeness grew without ceremony. No sudden declarations, no promises wrapped in poetry. Just hands brushing in passing, conversations that lasted until the fire burned low, trust assembled piece by careful piece. When her father came months later, summoned for negotiations, he paused at the threshold as if uncertain he had the right to enter. Mara met him not from the shadows, but from beside the Duke. She wore no jewels. She needed none. Lord Halvor bowed, hesitant, belated. The Duke took Mara's hand then, not to claim her, but to stand with her. And in that moment, she understood. She had not been chosen despite being overlooked. She had been chosen because she was whole.